Underwood and Flinch by Mike Bennett. Read by the author. Copyright Mike Bennett, 2008 to 2012. For more information, please visit www.underwoodandflinch.com. Episode 4. In a remote, rather shabby country villa on the Spanish island of Ibiza, Anton Marashov was trying to relax and keep cool in the heat of the afternoon. There was no air conditioning in the villa, so a freestanding fan was all Anton and his colleague, Ivan Trushko, had to circulate the air between them. Both men had packed inadequately for their brief stay. As a result, they both now sat in their underwear. Anton rolled a cold can of Cruz Campo beer over his forehead. "Oh, shit, it's hot. Give me a Moscow winter any day." Ivan took a large toke on the joint they were smoking and handed it to Anton.
"You hate climate wherever you go. It's always too hot or too cold. If we were in Moscow winter now, you'd be saying exact opposite."
"I would not." Anton reached for the joint. As he did so, he noticed Ivan's big hand pressing down on the armrest of the white sofa he was sitting on. "Ivan, you idiot, you've got blood on the sofa." Ivan's heavy brows knitted.
"Where?"
"There!" Anton pointed to the armrest. Ivan saw the red stain. Then he looked at his hands. There was still blood all over his knuckles. He showed them to Anton.
"Oops, it is the English, huh? I forgot to wash hands."
Anton groaned. He dropped the joint into the ashtray and stood up. "That's because the sight of blood on your hands is so fucking normal you don't see it anymore. You have to get into habit of washing in between beatings." He dragged the coffee table aside, wincing as it screeched on the tiled floor. Ivan rubbed his bloody knuckles on his thighs, and Anton slapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, don't just sit there. We have to get it cleaned up before it stains." Ivan waved Anton back to his chair.
"Relax, you act like a woman. Sergei doesn't care about this place."
"Of course he cares about it. He owns it. It's part of his investment. You don't believe me? You can ask him yourself later. When he gets here, he's going to want answers. Bloodstains on answers? Okay. Bloodstains on sofa? No." Ivan grunted dismissively.
"Huh, he didn't even pay for it. That fat little German gave it to him."
"No, Sergei took it as debt payment because the German couldn't pay what he owed."
"He was lucky Sergei didn't kill him."
"Yeah, well, maybe you won't be so lucky if you get blood all over his sofa. Now get up."
"What for?"
"So I can take the cover off, you fucking blockhead." Ivan's smile faded.
"Don't call me blockhead, Anton. It's not nice to call people names. Names like Rat Boy, huh? You remember how they used to call you that in the regiment?"
Ivan was a big man and a natural baritone, but Anton knew well the deeper note of menace in his voice. He had heard it often enough. "Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just worried. For you, that's all." Ivan's expression softened.
"You are like my brother, Anton. You look out for me, no?"
"Yeah, that's right. Now, will you get up and go and wash your hands? I need to get this cover off. Hopefully the blood hasn't soaked through to sofa underneath." Ivan got up. At 6'4", he towered over Anton like a tree. He laughed and sauntered off in the direction of the kitchen. Anton pulled off the sofa cover and checked the armrest. Thank God, the blood hadn't penetrated. He gathered the cover up and looked at the stain. It wasn't too bad. If he got some soap onto it and ran it under a cold tap, he should be able to get it out. If not, fuck it. They just have to go to IKEA and get a new cover. The German had liked IKEA. Their furniture was everywhere. The villa was like an IKEA show home. Anton took the joint from the ashtray and took a toke. He looked out into the kitchen to where Ivan now shook his wet hands into the sink.
Hey, Anton, where is towel?
Holding a lungful of smoke, Anton pointed to where the towel lay on the kitchen table. He let the smoke go in a long sigh. Behind you, on the table there. Ivan saw it and grinned.
Thanks. How is sofa, okay?
Anton walked into the kitchen and held up the sofa cover. It will live, but it's going to need to be scrubbed with soap or detergent.
Seriously, you want me to do it? It's my mess.
No, I can manage. Why don't you go out and see how the English is doing? Ivan made a face like a disgruntled teenager.
What? I just washed my hands.
I didn't say get your hands dirty, did I? Just go out and see how he's doing. Maybe he's had enough of being in pool. Anton went to the washing machine and picked up the box of detergent beside it. Ivan smiled.
I think for sure he's had enough of being in pool.
Well, then maybe he's finally prepared to do what it takes to get out, huh? Go and check on him. He reached into the detergent box for the small plastic scoop and scooped a measure of soap powder onto the stain. Ivan watched, interested.
You think that will do any good?
Hey, how the fuck do I know? I figure it's what my mother would do if she were here.
My mother would have made me lick it clean.
She sounds like smart woman, but I don't think Sergei would appreciate you sucking on his furniture. The sound of dogs barking erupted from outside. Ivan turned to the sound and grinned.
It sounds like the English isn't making any new friends out there.
Yeah, so go, will you? Make sure they aren't eating his fucking face off.
Okay, I leave you to woman's work while I go out and do man's.
Anton smiled thinly and began rubbing the powder into the stain. Yeah, you do that. And remember, Sergei wants him alive. Try to keep your hands clean. Ivan waved and stepped out into the brilliant sunshine. Anton looked down to where his hands were now grinding a gooey pink paste. Big idiot, he murmured. Next time we do it your mother's way. In the centre of the drained swimming pool, Mark Coleman, the man to whom Anton and Ivan referred as the English, sat naked and bound to a wooden chair. On his head was a dusty cowboy hat, fronted with the phrase, I love Ibiza, the word love being represented by a once shiny red heart motif. The hat was also red, though not as red as Mark's body, which, after a day in the pool, had burned to the colour of raw steak. His mouth worked against the strip of cloth that gagged him, sucking at it for moisture, even though it tasted of blood and vomit. Sweat stung his eyes. It trickled into them almost constantly. He blinked and shifted on his seat. The chair scraped on the broken, tiled floor, and the Rottweilers, who had been dozing in the shadow of the deep end, looked up at him. One of them growled, a low, ominous reminder of the impossibility of his getting anywhere near the shade they occupied. The dog's fellows joined in, and Mark lowered his gaze, a deferential gesture that he had learned could sometimes keep dogs from becoming aggressive. The growling simmered a moment longer, then died down to be replaced by disinterested panting. Mark listened as paws padded off to the right, the swaying chink of the dog's chain dragging across the tiles behind it. Then the sound of water as the dog lapped in the steel water pail that had been left for them. The sound was maddening. He looked at the hateful, vicious animal as it drank, water splattering around the pail to where it would slowly evaporate on the tiles. A fresh trickle of sweat ran into Mark's eyes, and he blinked, angry now, despite his fear of the dogs. His blinking only increased the flow and sting of sweat, and, momentarily lost to exhausted rage, Mark shook his head. His hat flew away and landed about a metre to his left. He cried out, a muffled howl of sudden panic as he felt the sun on his head and neck. The dogs began to growl again, getting to their feet and baring their teeth. Mark looked down, but this time it didn't placate the animals. They began to bark. He looked up to see the dogs moving out of the shade, ropes of saliva splattering from their jaws. He instinctively tried to move away from them, twisting and shifting his weight on the chair, when suddenly he felt himself toppling over backwards. He screamed as the world spun head over heels before he crashed down against the tiles. The dogs charged, running to the length of their chains, snapping and snarling, almost choking themselves in their frenzied efforts to be free and able to tear him to pieces. Then a voice roared something in Russian from over the rim of the deep end. Mark raised his face as best he could, terrified that he would see the owner of the voice, and yet, at the same time, hopeful, knowing that the man was the only way he was ever going to get out of the pool. Slowly, the shape of Ivan rose into view as he sauntered to the edge of the deep end and looked down at the dogs. Again he shouted in Russian, and the dogs fell silent, padding back slowly to the shade. Ivan looked up from the dogs and smiled at Mark.
You see, they are Spanish dogs, but they speak Russian.
He laughed.
Perhaps because their dinner gets served in Russian, no?
Then his expression changed to one of mock compassion.
Oh, look at you, stupid man. You've fallen over and lost your hat.
He dropped down into the deep end and walked over to Mark. He reached down, took the back of the chair in one of his hands, and dragged both it and Mark back to a sitting position.
There. That is better, no?
He patted Mark's cheek.
You want your hat?
He walked over to the hat and picked it up, dusting it down before setting it firmly back on Mark's head.
You don't want to lose that, my friend. You lose hat and your brain will roast like your English beef. And we don't want that, do we? You're no good to us, dead.
Mark moaned.
What? You want to tell me something now?
Mark nodded.
So now I have to take that pukey gag out of your mouth after I just washed my hands?
He frowned.
This had better be worth it, English.
He put his fingers into Mark's mouth and pulled the gag out.
There, now, talk to me.
Water, Mark croaked. Please, water. I'm dying.
Oh, you're thirsty, are you?
Mark nodded. Ivan smiled and patted the non-existent pockets of his boxer shorts.
Unfortunately, I didn't bring beer with me. But, if you don't mind dog water...
Please. Mark's voice was little more than a rasp. Ivan smiled.
Okay.
He reached out and grabbed the top of the chair's backrest, then began to drag it and Mark backwards towards the dogs. Immediately, they began to growl. No! Mark cried. What are you doing?
Taking you for drink. You think I'm going to take dog's bucket?
He laughed.
Oh no, that would be rude to dogs. But if I bring you over and introduce you, I'm sure they'd be happy to share.
The dogs began to bark and pace uncertainly as Ivan brought Mark within reach of their chains. No, please, don't. They'll kill me.
What, you don't want drink now?
Ivan set Mark and the chair upright next to the bucket.
After I drag you all the way over here?
Mark's eyes darted back and forth between the dogs and the water in the bucket. Please.
Oh, now you won't drink again. Make up your mind, English.
He took the backrest of the chair and leaned Mark forwards so that his face was just above the rim of the bucket. The front legs of the chair scraped the ground as the rear legs rose up. The cowboy hat fell off and rolled away. Please, Mark begged as the rim of the metal bucket struck his forehead.
Oh, I see,
said Ivan.
You can't reach water.
He gripped the ropes that bound Mark's waist to the chair and hoisted him from the ground. He suspended Mark in mid-air for a moment before taking the back of Mark's head and tipping it forwards so the top of his head entered the bucket.
Here we go. Better now?
Mark screamed as his head was pushed as far into the bucket as it could go before the sides stopped its progress. He could feel the warm water touching his scalp.
Oh, your big head is too big for the bucket, huh?
Ivan pulled the chair back and Mark came up again, the bucket still on his head. Water poured over him before the bucket fell and clattered onto the tiles. The dogs continued to bark and snap. Mark gasped, his tongue groping at his lips for water.
Oh, look, clumsy man! You spilled the dog's water! I don't think they'd be very happy now.
I've told you all I know. Portugal. They're in Portugal. I can't tell you any more because I don't know any more. I haven't seen them since it happened. Oh, please. Please let me go. Anton called down to them. Ivan, what the fuck are you doing with him? Shut those fucking dogs up, will you? He was carrying the dripping sofa cover over to a clothesline that was strung between two trees.
I'm trying to give our friend here a nice drink,
said Ivan.
But he spilled it.
Anton stopped. He was looking away into the distance, to the dirt road that led to the villa, and a white cloud of dust rising behind a shimmering black car. Oh, shit. He turned back to Ivan. Sergei's here. Quick, get the English away from those dogs before they fucking eat him. And shut them up, for Christ's sake. Ivan again took hold of the back of the chair and dragged Mark out of range of the dogs. He shouted at the dogs in Russian, and their barking died down. Anton pegged the sofa cover to the washing line, all the time watching the car as it rippled towards them through the heat haze. He turned and hurried back to the pool. Did he talk? He jumped in at the shallow end and walked over to Ivan. Ivan shook his head.
Nothing new.
Fuck! Anton grabbed Mark's hair and pulled his head back. Listen, asshole, you'd better stop fucking around and tell us about your murdering English friends right now, because any minute our boss will be here, and if he doesn't hear what he wants to hear, he's going to kick our asses. And that means when he's gone, we pour a bottle of olive oil over you and leave you here to fry. You understand? Nearby, car doors slammed. 3 men, said Mark. Mullins, Hodgkiss, Sullivan. They set me up. I had no idea what they were planning. Ivan spat onto the dusty tiles.
Of course you didn't. Even you couldn't be that stupid.
I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. A voice came from the poolside. Your friend looks like he could use some calamine lotion, Anton Marashov. Anton and Ivan turned to see the silhouettes of 3 suited men in sunglasses. The man in the centre continued. I take it he hasn't told you anything more. Anton shielded his eyes from the sun. He does not know anything more, Captain. If he did, he would have told us. The man addressed as Captain, whom Anton and Ivan privately referred to by his first name of Sergei, came down the steps into the pool. You're sure of that? He walked over to them, his shoes crunching on the tiny stones and cracked tiles. The other men came down and followed him. Ivan nodded.
He told us all he know yesterday, Captain. I don't believe he has anything else. He is weak, a coward. He would give me his mother if I ask him.
And so this? Sergei waved a hand to where the dogs panted and lapped at the water around the upturned bucket. What? You've just been playing around with him? Ivan shrugged, unsure of his position.
He was thirsty. I gave him drink.
Sergei's face remained inscrutable. He looked at Mark and took off his sunglasses. You are thirsty, Mr. Coleman. Mark looked up and nodded. Yes, sir. Sergei held out a hand to one of the men behind him. Water. A small bottle of mineral water was handed to him. Sergei unscrewed the cap. Here. He slowly poured the water over Mark's cracked lips and into his mouth. Easy. He stopped pouring. Swallow it slowly. Mark did so. Sergei poured a little more into his mouth. Mr. Coleman, as I'm sure you know all too well, your friends murdered my nephew and 2 of my men, yes? He stopped pouring to allow Mark to respond. I didn't know they were going to do that. I swear to you, said Mark, water spilling over his lips. They said they wanted me to get some pills for them, so they could sell them on in Portugal. They said they couldn't deal with you themselves because you and Mullins are enemies or something. I trusted them. The bastards set me up. But this did not stop you from taking the pills from my nephew after his death and selling them on for your own gain. Mark's face contorted with despair. Did you really think I would not hear about you selling those pills, Mr. Coleman? Yes, Ibiza is a long way from Benidorm, but since I am the controlling source of these pills in Spain, it was really only a matter of time before word of their unauthorized circulation here reached me. Tears spilled from Mark's eyes. I would have brought them back to you, I swear, but I was so scared. Oh, God, please. Please don't kill me. Sergei squatted down in front of Mark. I believe you, English. You are a coward, and a coward like you would never have had the courage to be involved in an act of violence against me. Mark nodded. Yes, I am. I'm a coward. And I also believe, for that same reason, that you don't know any more than you have already told my men here. Mark nodded again. Yes, that's right. I don't know those bastards anything. If I could, I'd kill them myself. Sergei smiled. Then I must thank you for telling us what you do know. I apologize for what you have had to suffer. Our mistreatment of you here is, how you say, making us even? Mark wasn't sure if he understood correctly. Please, I'll do anything you say. I won't say a word to the police. Sergei nodded. Yes, I know. He stood up. Mark squinted up at him. Does that mean you're going to let me go? Of course, said Sergei. He handed the bottle back to the men behind him. Anton and Ivan looked anxious. Anton asked in Russian, You really want us to let him go? Sergei smiled. In Russian he replied, Always the comedian Anton Marashov. Cut off his head. Feed the rest to the dogs. Thank you for listening to Underwood and Flinch. More episodes will be added to this YouTube channel soon. To download the entire audiobook for free right now, go to www.underwoodandflinch.com or search for it on iTunes. Thank you.